$5 million. That's the exact number showing in my bank account right now, the result of 50 years of uninterrupted work, of sacrifices that at the time I called investments in the future, of choices I was absolutely certain were the right ones. Are you enjoying this story? Then consider supporting the channel by subscribing. Take a look. 94.8% of the people who watch these videos are still not subscribed to the channel. If you're part of that group, take the opportunity to subscribe now. It's free and you'll keep receiving amazing stories. And don't forget, at the end of the video, you'll find more stories like this one. I'm 68 years old today, and if you ask me if it was worth it, if I would do it all over again, I'll look you in the eyes and tell you with a brutal honesty that cuts my soul, no, 1,000 times no. And if I could go back in time and slap my 18-year-old self across the face, I would do it with all the strength left in this tired and sick body. Because that boy full of plans and ambitions had no idea of the lonely hell he was building for himself. Brick by brick, dollar by dollar, year after year of a wasted life, chasing something that in the end turned out to be completely empty and meaningless. I need to tell you this story, not because I want your pity, not because I'm looking for sympathy or comfort, but because maybe, just maybe, if I tell you exactly how I destroyed my own life while thinking I was building it, someone out there will stop and reconsider the path they're on. Someone will pause before declining that dinner invitation because they have to work late. Someone will think twice before pushing away a person who wants to get close because relationships are complicated and take time that could be used for advancing their career. Someone will realize before it's too late that the numbers in a bank account, no matter how impressive they are, cannot and will never fill the void of a life lived without love, without connection, without the messiness and beauty of real human relationships. I was born in a small town in Pennsylvania in 1957, the youngest of 4 children in a working-class family that struggled constantly to make ends meet. My father worked in a steel mill, 12-hour shifts that left him exhausted and irritable. My mother cleaned houses for the wealthy families on the other side of town, coming home late with her hands raw and her back aching. We lived in a cramped 2-bedroom house where I shared a room with my 2 brothers, and my sister slept on a fold-out couch in the living room. There was never enough of anything, never enough food, never enough space, never enough money, never enough peace. My parents fought constantly about bills, about debts, about how we were going to pay for this or that. I remember lying in bed as a child, listening to them argue in the kitchen, my mother crying about how she didn't know how we were going to afford winter coats for all of us, my father's voice getting louder and angrier because he felt like a failure for not being able to provide better for his family. Those nights shaped me in ways I didn't understand until much, much later. Somewhere deep in my child's mind, a decision was made. I would never, ever be poor. I would never struggle like my parents struggled. I would never have to choose between paying the electric bill and buying groceries. I would have so much money that I would never have to worry about anything financial ever again. That decision became the foundation of everything that followed, the bedrock upon which I built my entire existence. It was a reasonable goal, wasn't it? Who could blame a child for wanting to escape poverty? The problem wasn't the goal itself. The problem was that it became my only goal, my singular obsession, the lens through which I viewed every single choice for the next 5 decades. In school, I was the kid who never went to parties, never played sports, never hung out after class. While other kids were discovering themselves, making mistakes, forming friendships, having their first crushes, learning how to navigate the complex world of human relationships, I was studying. Always studying. I became obsessed with grades, with being the best, with getting scholarships because I knew that was my only ticket out of that cramped house and that struggling existence. My teachers loved me because I was every educator's dream student. Attentive, hard-working, never causing trouble, always prepared. My classmates mostly ignored me, and on the rare occasions they noticed me, it was to make fun of me for being a nerd, for being boring, for being that weird kid who actually seemed to enjoy homework. There was a girl in my junior year of high school, Sarah, who sat next to me in chemistry class. She was pretty, kind, always smiling, and for some reason that I still don't fully understand, she seemed interested in me. She would start conversations, laugh at my awkward attempts at humor, find excuses to work with me on lab assignments. One day, she very clearly, very explicitly asked me if I wanted to go to the spring dance with her. I remember the moment perfectly, standing in the hallway between classes, her looking at me with those hopeful eyes, waiting for my answer. And you know what I said? I said no. I told her I couldn't because I had to study for the SATs, which were still 3 months away. The disappointment on her face was immediate and obvious, but she smiled and said, "Okay, maybe another time." There was never another time. She stopped trying to talk to me after that and eventually started dating a guy from the football team. They looked happy together. I told myself it didn't matter, that I had made the smart choice, that dances were a waste of time when I needed to focus on getting into a good college with a full scholarship. I did get that scholarship. Full ride to Penn State, studying engineering. My parents were proud, my siblings were happy for me, and I left that small town at 18 feeling like I was finally on the right path, like I had figured out the formula for success. College was supposed to be where you discover yourself, where you have experiences, where you make lifelong friends and maybe meet the person you'll spend your life with. That's what happened for most people. But not for me. For me, college was just another version of high school. Classes, library, dorm room, repeat. I had roommates my freshman year who very quickly learned not to invite me to anything because I always said no. Parties? No. I had studying to do. Road trip for spring break? No, I was taking extra courses over break. Casual hangouts in the common room? No, I needed to work on my assignments. By sophomore year, I had a single room, which I told myself was perfect because it meant fewer distractions, but really it just meant more isolation. The engineering program was intense, competitive, filled with brilliant students from all over the country. I thrived in that environment because I could channel all my energy into something concrete, something measurable. Grades didn't lie. Test scores were objective. Class rankings were clear. I knew exactly where I stood and what I needed to do to get ahead. What I didn't know, what I couldn't measure, was what I was losing by pouring every ounce of myself into academic achievement. I was losing the chance to be young, to be stupid, to make mistakes, to fall in love, to have my heart broken, to learn who I was outside of my grades and accomplishments. But I didn't see that as a loss. I saw it as discipline, as sacrifice, as what successful people do. There was a moment in my senior year that I think about often now, lying awake in my empty house in the middle of the night. I was in the engineering lab late one evening, working on my senior thesis project. A graduate student, Michelle, was also there working on her dissertation. We had crossed paths before, exchanged pleasantries, but that night we ended up talking for hours. She was brilliant, funny, passionate about her research, and she had this way of looking at the world that was so different from my narrow, goal-oriented perspective. She talked about why engineering mattered beyond just money or career success, about how technology could solve real human problems, about the responsibility we had to use our knowledge for good. I was fascinated by her, not just intellectually, but in a way that made my heart beat faster, made me nervous and excited at the same time. When we finally left the lab around midnight, we walked across campus together, and when we got to the point where our paths diverged, she stopped and looked at me and said, "We should do this again. I like talking to you." And I, like an absolute idiot, said, "Yeah, maybe," in a non-committal way, and walked off to my dorm. She tried a few more times after that to connect, to have coffee, to grab lunch, but I always found excuses. I was busy with my thesis. I was applying to graduate programs. I had interviews to prepare for. The truth, which I couldn't admit even to myself at the time, was that I was terrified. Terrified of what it would mean to let someone in, to spend time on something that wasn't directly advancing my career goals, to risk the vulnerability that comes with caring about another person. So I pushed her away, gently but firmly, until she stopped trying. Years later, I looked her up online and saw that she was a professor at MIT, married with 2 kids, doing amazing research, and apparently living a full, rich life. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had said yes to that coffee, if I had allowed myself to be human for just a moment. I graduated summa cum laude, got accepted into master's programs at several top universities, chose MIT for its reputation and its generous funding package. My parents came to my graduation, looking older than I remembered. wearing clothes that had obviously been purchased specifically for this occasion and would probably never be worn again. They hugged me and told me how proud they were, how I had achieved what they never could, how I was going to have opportunities they never dreamed of. My mother held my face in her work-worn hands and said something I dismissed at the time, but that echoes in my mind now. Just remember, sweetheart, success isn't just about money or career. Don't forget to live your life, to find someone to share it with, to be happy. I nodded and probably said something like, "I know, Mom, I will, but I didn't mean it." I had no intention of slowing down or diverting my focus. I was on a mission, and nothing was going to stop me. Graduate school was more of the same, only intensified. MIT was brutally competitive, filled with the best and brightest from around the world, and I was determined to not just keep up, but to excel. I worked 16, 18, sometimes 20 hours a day. I lived in a tiny studio apartment off campus that I barely decorated because I was never there except to sleep. I ate poorly, mostly takeout consumed while reading papers or writing code. I had no social life to speak of. The other students in my program would occasionally try to include me in social gatherings, study groups that always turned into social events, trips into Boston on weekends, but I always declined. I couldn't see the point. We were there to learn, to research, to build our careers, not to waste time socializing. My advisor, Dr. Patterson, was a brilliant but workaholic professor who saw in me a kindred spirit. He piled work on me, knowing I would not only accept it, but excel at it. I became his favorite student, the one he relied on for his most important projects, the one he recommended for the best opportunities. I published papers, won awards, got my master's in record time. At 23, I was already being recruited by top tech companies with offers that seemed unbelievable to the kid who grew up in that cramped house in Pennsylvania. But I didn't take those offers. Instead, I continued straight into a PhD program, again at MIT, again with Dr. Patterson, because he convinced me that more credentials meant more opportunities, and I believed him. The PhD took 5 years. 5 years that are now a blur of research, publications, conferences, and a loneliness so profound that I learned to not even feel it anymore. I became like a machine, programmed with a single objective: succeed academically and professionally. I defended my dissertation at 28 to a packed room of faculty and students, received the highest honors, and immediately accepted a position at a major tech company in Silicon Valley with a starting salary of $150,000 plus stock options. My parents couldn't even comprehend that kind of money. When I told them, my father just stared at me and said, "Son, that's more than I made in 10 years at the mill." I felt proud, validated, like all the sacrifice had been worth it. Moving to California was like entering a different universe. Silicon Valley in the late 80s was the wild west of technology, a place where young, brilliant people were building the future and getting rich doing it. The company I joined was one of the hot startups of the era, working on cutting-edge software that would eventually become industry standard. The culture was intense. Long hours were not just expected, but celebrated. Sleeping at the office was common. Weekends didn't exist. But unlike my colleagues, many of whom complained about the workload, I loved it. This was exactly what I had been training for my entire life. While others struggled with work-life balance, I didn't have any life outside of work to balance, so I just worked. And I excelled. I got promoted rapidly. Within 2 years, I was leading a team. Within 5 years, I was a senior director. By my mid-30s, I was a vice president making well over $300,000 a year, plus substantial stock options. I bought a condo in San Francisco, started accumulating wealth, invested smartly. On paper, I was the epitome of success. In reality, I was hollowing out from the inside. I had work colleagues, but no friends. I went on a few dates over the years, usually set up by well-meaning co-workers, who couldn't understand why someone like me was still single, but they always ended awkwardly. I didn't know how to connect with people on a personal level. Conversation beyond work topics felt forced and uncomfortable. Physical intimacy was completely foreign to me. After enough failed dates, I stopped accepting invitations altogether. My 30s passed in a blur of career advancement and accumulating wealth. The startup I worked for went public when I was 36, and overnight my stock options were worth $2.3 million. I became a millionaire before 40, which was one of the goals I had set for myself. I should have felt elated, accomplished, successful. Instead, I felt nothing, just a vague sense that I should keep going, keep accumulating, keep advancing. There was always the next goal, the next milestone, the next achievement. I moved to another company for a bigger title and more money, then another, then another. Each move came with a bigger paycheck, more responsibility, more prestige, and more isolation. My mother died when I was 42. Heart attack, sudden and unexpected. My sister called me at work to tell me, and I remember feeling annoyed at first because I was in the middle of an important meeting. Annoyed at being told my mother died. What kind of person had I become? I flew back to Pennsylvania for the funeral, stayed 3 days, saw my father completely broken, saw my siblings with their spouses and children, saw what a real family looked like, and felt like an alien observing a species I didn't belong to. At the reception after the funeral, my older sister cornered me and asked point blank, "Are you happy? Really happy? Because you have all this success, all this money, but you're here alone, and Mom worried about you constantly, worried that you were so focused on work that you forgot to live." I brushed her off, said I was fine, said everyone had different paths in life. But her words stuck with me, needling at me during the flight back to California, and for weeks afterward, until I successfully buried them under more work. Are you enjoying this story? Then consider supporting the channel by subscribing. Take a look. 94.8% of the people who watch these videos are still not subscribed to the channel. If you're part of that group, take the opportunity to subscribe now. It's free, and you'll keep receiving amazing stories. And don't forget, at the end of the video you'll find more stories like this one. My 40s and 50s were essentially the same story repeated with bigger numbers. More jobs, more money, more promotions, more recognition in my industry, more isolation. I developed health problems, high blood pressure, prediabetes, chronic insomnia, anxiety. I started taking pills for everything. A pharmacy of medications that kept my deteriorating body functional enough to keep working those 80-hour weeks. My doctors told me to slow down, to reduce stress, to find hobbies, to develop a social life. I nodded and ignored them. What else was I going to do? Work was all I knew. My identity was completely tied up in my professional success. Without work, who was I? That was a question I didn't want to answer. I retired at 65, not by choice, but because my body essentially gave me an ultimatum. I had a serious health scare, a minor heart attack that the doctors said was a warning shot, that the next one could kill me if I didn't make major life changes. So I retired. I had more than enough money by then. My investments and savings had grown to almost $5 million. I could live comfortably for the rest of my life without working another day. I should have been relieved, excited about this new chapter. Instead, I was terrified. For the first time in nearly 50 years, I had nothing to do, nowhere to be, no meetings, no deadlines, no projects, just empty days stretching ahead of me with no structure, no purpose, no meaning. The first year of retirement was the longest year of my life. I tried to fill the time with activities. I took up golf, but playing alone wasn't fun, and I didn't have anyone to play with. I tried joining clubs, but making friends at 65 when you've never learned how to make friends is nearly impossible. Everyone else had established social circles, families, decades of shared history. I was the awkward newcomer who didn't know how to engage in casual conversation, who had no stories about children or grandchildren, who had nothing to talk about except work that no longer existed. I tried traveling, took expensive trips to places I had always wanted to see, but discovered that traveling alone is incredibly lonely. I'd be at the Eiffel Tower or the Grand Canyon or some beautiful beach, and all I could think was how sad it was to experience these places with no one to share them with. The loneliness became unbearable, not the kind of loneliness you feel when you're temporarily alone, but the existential loneliness of realizing that there is not a single person on this planet who truly knows you, who cares about you beyond superficial pleasantries, who would notice if you disappeared. I went weeks without having a meaningful conversation with anyone. months without physical contact with another human being, beyond accidental brushes in the grocery store or a handshake with a financial advisor. I started talking to myself just to hear a human voice in my empty house. I began having dinner at restaurants, not because I enjoyed the food, but because I needed to be around people, even if I wasn't interacting with them. My siblings reached out occasionally, but our relationships were distant. They had their own lives, their own families, their own problems. I was the successful brother who had moved away and built a different life, and while they were polite and occasionally invited me to family gatherings, I always felt like an outsider. Their conversations were filled with references to shared experiences I wasn't part of, inside jokes I didn't understand, family drama I had missed because I was too busy working. Their children, my nieces and nephews, barely knew me. I was the rich uncle who showed up once a year with expensive presents, but no real connection. On my 65th birthday, I had an experience that crystallized everything. I woke up alone in my king-size bed in my expensive condo, and my first thought was, who's going to acknowledge my birthday? The answer was crushing. I got a few text messages from my siblings, generic happy birthday messages that they probably sent while doing something else. I got an automated email from my bank. That was it. No calls, no cards, no one wanting to celebrate with me, no one who cared enough to make me feel special on the day I was born. I sat there on the edge of my bed, this 65-year-old man with $5 million in the bank, and I cried. I cried for hours, deep, racking sobs that hurt my chest, crying for everything I had lost while thinking I was winning, crying for the life I never lived, for the love I never experienced, for the connections I never made. That night, I did something I had never done before. I really looked at my life honestly. I made a list, an actual written list, of everything I had and everything I didn't have. On one side, $5 million, a paid-off condo in one of the most expensive cities in America, a closet full of expensive clothes I rarely wore, a garage with a luxury car I barely drove, investments that generated passive income, retirement accounts that were more than sufficient, awards from my professional career, patents with my name on them, a resume that was impressive by any standard. On the other side of the page, never been in love, never had a romantic relationship, never been kissed with passion, never made love to another person. Yes, at 65, I was a virgin, not just physically but emotionally. Never had close friends, never had someone I could call at 2 a.m. when I was scared or sad or just needed to talk. Never experienced the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of letting someone truly know me. Never had children, never held my own baby, never taught a child to ride a bike, or helped with homework, or watched them graduate. Never had grandchildren to dote on, never built a family, never created a legacy beyond money and professional achievements that no one would remember 50 years from now. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I had wasted my entire life. Not just wasted, actively destroyed it while thinking I was building something meaningful. Every choice I made, every no I said to human connection, every relationship I pushed away because it might interfere with my career, every moment I chose work over life, had led me to this. 65 years old, rich beyond my childhood dreams, and more alone than I thought it was possible for a human being to be. And here's the cruelest part. It's too late. Too late to start over. Too late to build the relationships that take decades to develop. Too late to find love, to build a family, to create the connections that make life meaningful. I tried, after that birthday. I really tried. I got on dating apps. But what woman in her 60s wants to start a relationship with a man who has zero relationship experience, who doesn't know how to be vulnerable, who has spent his entire life walled off from emotional connection? I went on a few dates. They were disasters. I didn't know how to talk about feelings. I didn't know how to flirt. The mechanics of physical intimacy were completely foreign to me. How do you learn to be intimate at 65 when you've spent your entire life avoiding it? I tried therapy, spent a fortune on therapists who all basically told me the same thing, that I had spent so long building walls around myself that I didn't know how to take them down, that I had trained myself to not feel deeply, to not connect, to not be vulnerable, and that undoing that training was extremely difficult, maybe impossible at my age. One therapist, a kind woman in her 50s, said something that haunts me. You've spent your whole life running from poverty, but in the process, you created a different kind of poverty, an emotional and relational poverty that's just as devastating. Maybe more so because at least financial poverty can be overcome. What you're experiencing now, this profound isolation and lack of connection, is much harder to fix, especially this late in life. My health continued to deteriorate. At 66, I had another heart attack, more serious this time. Spent 2 weeks in the hospital and not a single person visited. Not one. My siblings sent flowers and called once or twice, but they had their own lives. They couldn't just drop everything and fly across the country for a brother they barely knew. I didn't blame them. How could I? I had chosen this. I had spent 50 years choosing career over connection, work over relationships, money over love. This was the logical conclusion of all those choices. When I was discharged, the doctors were blunt. My quality of life was only going to decline. I needed to prepare for the reality that I would soon need full-time care. They suggested I start looking into assisted living facilities, so that's what I did. I spent months researching, visiting luxury senior living communities, the kind that cost $8,000 to $12,000 a month, but provide everything: private apartments, gourmet meals, 24-hour nursing care, activities, transportation, everything except what I actually needed, which was people who cared about me. I found a place, signed the contract, paid the deposit. I'm moving there in a few weeks. I'll spend the rest of my life there, however long that is, surrounded by strangers in various stages of decline. All of us wealthy enough to afford this gilded cage. All of us alone in the ways that matter. And the money. The $5 million I spent my entire life accumulating, I don't even know what to do with it. I have no heirs, no children or grandchildren to leave it to. My siblings are financially stable and made it clear they don't need or want my money. I'll probably leave it to charity, some organization I choose from a list because I have no personal connection to any cause. Some nonprofit will send a nice thank you letter that no one will read, will put my name on a plaque that no one will look at, and will use my money for good work that I'll never see. And then I'll be forgotten, completely and utterly forgotten, because I never gave anyone a reason to remember me. I was never present in anyone's life in a meaningful way. I was the guy who worked all the time, who had money, who seemed successful from the outside but who never let anyone close enough to actually know him. Sometimes I lie awake at night in this expensive condo and try to pinpoint the exact moment where it all went wrong, the specific choice where I took the wrong turn. But there wasn't one moment. It was thousands of moments, thousands of small choices that all pointed in the same direction, away from connection, toward isolation. Every time I said no to an invitation, every time I chose work over people, every time I told myself that relationships could wait until I achieved the next goal, I was building this prison I now live in. A prison made of money and success and loneliness so profound it feels like drowning in slow motion. The tragic irony is that I achieved exactly what I set out to achieve. I escaped poverty. I became wealthy. I never had to worry about money. I proved that the poor kid from Pennsylvania could make it big. But in the process of escaping one kind of poverty, I created another kind, a poverty of the soul, a bankruptcy of human connection that no amount of money can remedy. I am rich and I am poor at the same time. I have everything and I have nothing. I succeeded at my goal and I failed at life. If I could go back, if I could give advice to my 18-year-old self standing on the edge of adulthood, making those early choices that would shape everything that followed, what would I say? I would grab him by the shoulders, look him in the eyes and say, yes, work hard. Yes, escape poverty. Yes, build a career. Yes, achieve financial security. But for God's sake, don't make it your entire life. Say yes when that girl asks you to the dance. Go to the parties. Make friends. Take the time to build relationships. Let people in. Be vulnerable. Risk your heart. Fall in love, even if it means you might get hurt. Have sex, lots of it, with people you care about. Make mistakes. Be stupid sometimes. Waste time with people you love. Choose connection over career at least some of the time. Build a life, not just a resume and a bank account. I would tell him that success without connection is not success at all. It's just organized loneliness. That money without people to share it with is just numbers on a screen. That career achievements that no one cares about are empty trophies. That at the end of your life, and trust me, the end comes faster than you think, you won't care about how much money you made or what title you had or what awards you won. You'll care about whether you loved and were loved, whether you had people who knew you and cared about you, whether you built something real and human and meaningful beyond professional success. But I can't go back. I can't redo those 50 years. I can't unmake those thousands of choices. All I can do is sit here in my expensive prison and regret, and warn others not to make the same mistakes. Don't do what I did. Don't sacrifice your humanity on the altar of success. Don't postpone life thinking you'll get to it later, because later comes faster than you think and then it's too late. Don't build walls around your heart to protect yourself, because those walls don't protect you, they just isolate you. Don't spend your whole life running towards something without stopping to consider what you're running away from. I have $5 million, and I would trade every single penny of it for one genuine relationship, for one person who actually knows me and loves me anyway, for the experience of holding someone I love while they sleep, for children and grandchildren who visit because they want to, not out of obligation. I would trade all of it for the memories of a life actually lived, not just endured. I would trade all of it for the ability to go back and make different choices. But I can't. The money stays and so does the loneliness. So here I sit at 68, waiting for my move to the assisted living facility, waiting for my health to decline further, waiting for the end that will come in a clean room with professional caregivers who will be kind but indifferent, who will hold my hand because it's their job, but who won't cry when I die because I was just another resident, just another lonely old person with money, but no one who really loved them. This is the price I paid. Not $5 million. That's what I gained. Are you enjoying this story? Then consider supporting the channel by subscribing. Take a look. 94.8% of the people who watch these videos are still not subscribed to the channel. If you're part of that group, take the opportunity to subscribe now. It's free and you'll keep receiving amazing stories. And don't forget, at the end of the video, you'll find more stories like this one. The price I paid was everything that actually matters. Love, connection, family, friendship, intimacy, vulnerability, the messy, beautiful, complicated experience of being fully human. That's what I traded for financial success, and it was the worst trade in the history of trades. Don't make the same mistake. Please learn from my failure. It's too late for me, but maybe not for you.